Hi friends, good evening. I'm about a minute early, but good evening everyone. My name is Dr. Mitzi Joy. I am a board certified neurologist and MS specialist who does a lot of research looking at MS and ethnic minority populations and loves to educate people about MS. As well as other neurologic problems. And as an aside, I am a singer and a musician, and I love music too. So today I am starting off with a artist that I love, and I haven't been listening to him for a long time. His name is Johnny Lang, and he's a blues singer, but I don't know how I discovered this music of his, but I just love his voice. He's got like this really soulful, gritty voice, and so this has been my theme song this week. If you saw my post earlier today, he has this song called Make It Move, and it talks about, you can waste your whole life waiting for a mountain to move, but it's waiting on you. And so that goes really in line with what I'm going to talk about tonight, because I am going to talk about tips for living well with MS. And these are probably tips that, could be used to live well, period, with any chronic disease. But particularly, I'm going to be focusing on MS tonight. And so I think that this song is so appropriate because sometimes, especially after a diagnosis of MS, people often feel helpless, but it's important to know that there are things that you can do to improve your health and to make sure that you're living your best life, as the youngsters call it. So living my best life. But anyway, I hope that everyone is having an amazing Thursday, and I'm going to turn Johnny down. All right, and then we are going to go ahead and get started. Well, good evening. Again, my name is Dr. Mitzi Joy Williams. I am, as I said, a board certified neurologist and multiple sclerosis specialist in Atlanta, Georgia. And I do a lot of work with advocacy. I work with ethnic minority populations. And I also do a lot of work with increasing diversity and inclusion in clinical research. So those are just some of the things and some of the projects that I'm working on. And I have a lot of initiatives and exciting things that I'm doing in these areas. But tonight, I am going to talk about living well, or tips for living well with MS, and I'm going to give 4 tips, 4 things that we're going to discuss very briefly, and then I'm going to do something for myself to help myself live well, and that is go exercise at my Bounce Fitness class tonight. So, excuse me. All right, so let's get started. All right, so tip number 1 for living well with MS is to improve or have a healthy, well-balanced diet and to exercise. I spent a lot of time talking about exercise on my last live stream. Well, I won't say a lot of time, but I spent some time talking about exercise on my last live stream, so I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail about exercise, but I do often have people ask me about diet and MS. And they ask me this for a variety of reasons. Because now we live in a very health conscious society. People are always trying to find ways that they can live better, eat better. Many people are into organic eating, which is great. And so many times when people come to the office, they say, Dr. Mitzi, what kind of diet should I be eating? What should I be eating? And so I usually say, it's the same advice your mama and your grandmama gave you, right? Eat right and exercise. So 9 times out of 10, when you are putting it in your mouth, you know if you should be eating it or not, don't you? You do, right? So cupcakes versus a nice green salad. Certainly we do have to educate ourselves, right? So it's important to look at labels on the foods that we eat. And so, there are many different diets that people with MS can take. There is not one particular diet, however, that is the best diet for MS. So I have patients who do all kinds of diets. I have folks who do ketogenic diet. I have folks who will do the paleo diet. They will do a modified form of the paleo called the Walls Protocol, which was created by a physician who lives with MS. I have folks that do gluten-free. And so the bottom line is that many people do well with all of these different types of diets, but the bottom line with most of these plans is that they encourage you to eat more fresh foods and less processed foods. And then each plan has their little different tweaks on it. So some people will say, okay, you eat a bunch of meat, you cut back on the carbs or what have you, but most of the plans encourage you to eat fresh processed foods. So more fresh foods, right? Shop on the outside of the grocery store. Hi there. Hi there, Ms. Coleman. Hey, Dr. Creighton. So you want to shop on the outside of the grocery store, stay away from the inside as much as possible, okay? So there's no one particular diet, but certainly eating a healthy, well-balanced diet is important. Whatever is the best plan for you to be healthy is the best diet for you. Some people need a very strict guideline with a list of foods that they should eat, a list of foods that they shouldn't eat, and other people can just kind of eyeball it, right? So it's also important to pay attention to portion sizes as well. So a healthy, well-balanced diet, however that looks for you, but you don't necessarily have to run out and do paleo to live well with MS, and then making sure that you're shopping on the outside of the grocery store. So the other part to that is exercise. Moving your body will help many things like we talked about on the last live stream. Exercise can help with mood. It can help with spasms or spasticity. It can also help get your bowels moving if you're stopped up or constipated. So many benefits to exercise. So that's tip number one, a healthy, well-balanced diet and exercise. Tip number two for living well with MS is to stop smoking if you're smoking. So when I was in medical school, it was a little bit of a, I won't say a joke, but it pretty much was true. If you looked at a risk factor for most diseases, if you picked smoking, it probably was going to be the right answer if it was listed. So we know that there are lots of issues with smoking related to lung issues and other things, but with MS in particular, smoking is a risk factor for MS, and there have been studies that have shown that smoking speeds up the path from relapsing MS to progressive MS, okay? So smoking is, so we're not talking about just the issue with the lungs. We're talking about specific studies with MS speeds up kind of the path or the start of progressive MS, all right? And also, there are studies that suggest that people may have more relapses or worse disease course if they are smoking and they have MS. So I encourage strongly all of my patients to stop smoking. If there are things that your doctor can do to help, some people do well with certain medications, some people can do the patch, some people can quit cold turkey, all right? But that is very important because it can actually affect the disease itself. And it's not just the smoking, it actually is the nicotine, right? So if we think about the mechanism of how MS works, remember with MS, the immune system is overactive. So those immune cells are crossing over into that area where your brain and your spinal cord are and attacking the myelin or the coating of the nerves. So basically that barrier that usually keeps those things out becomes leaky. And so nicotine makes that barrier even more leaky. So more of those cells can go across and attack your brain and spine, right? So stopping smoking is something that you definitely could do to improve your health and to improve your ability to live well with MS. So that's tip number two. Tip number three, stress management. So many of my patients tell me on a regular basis that stress affects their MS. There are a lot of folks who wonder if stress can actually cause MS to come on or start, so to speak. And there have been some studies that have looked at the effects of stress, whether it be psychological stress or actual physical stress, like a trauma, car accident, or what have you. We've not seen clear evidence that MS is started by a stressful event. However, there are many people who report that maybe their symptoms started after a stressful period. And many of my patients come in after they're diagnosed and say, Dr. Williams, I'm going through a lot of stress. My symptoms feel worse. So that is not uncommon. So it is very important to learn how to manage stress. Because it can cause what we call a pseudo relapse. So there are relapses where we think that there are new lesions in the brain that are causing the symptoms to happen. Pseudo relapses happen when there's some other outside force that temporarily causes symptoms to be worse, and stress is one of those. And sometimes when we say stress, or when some of my patients come in and they talk about stress, they're really describing symptoms of depression. So it is also important to recognize when just a stressful event has really crossed more over into symptoms of depression. So certainly when we're in stressful situations, it can affect the way we think. It can affect sleep. For some people, it increases anxiety. But if you start having issues like difficulty sleeping long periods of time, if you start to feel sad a lot or cry more, if you have symptoms like that, it's important that you go and talk to your doctor, because you could actually have depression and be calling it stress, okay? And so that's important to be addressed and to be treated. So how do we deal with stress? I tell all of my patients and all of my friends that if we're awake, we're going to have stress, right? As long as you're awake. But we have to learn how to effectively manage that so that it doesn't make us sick. Because if the stress is not dealt with properly, it can begin to manifest itself in physical ways in our bodies. So how do we do that? A couple of different ways. It's important to find things that you enjoy to help decrease stress. Again, exercise is a good stress reducer. And when we say exercise, it does not necessarily mean that you have to go out and put on your outfit and go to the gym for an hour. Getting your body moving a little bit at a time will help. For some folks, it's finding something that they enjoy. I enjoy listening to music or going to concerts or playing music or singing. So finding an activity that you do that you love can decrease stress. Something that I've gotten into recently is coloring. So it doesn't have to be something elaborate, but it's important to find some type of outlet, whether it is coloring, whether it's music, whether it is journaling, writing down your feelings. Those type of things will help decrease stress and help you to manage it so that it doesn't begin to physically manifest itself. In some cases, depending on the situation, sometimes psychological counseling is appropriate, and there's nothing wrong with that. All of us need a little bit of help sometimes. So I encourage all of my patients, if they even think about it, to consider doing some psychological counseling to help deal with the anxiety, deal with the stress in an effective way so that it doesn't harm your body and, again, manifest as physical symptoms. So stress management, stress reduction is huge to living well with MS. Any chronic disease, living life, period. Stress management is greatly important. All right, and then the last tip, so the fourth tip for living well with MS is to be connected to other people. And I've touched on this in one of my other videos, but having a sense of community is really important. With MS, we know that it is not a disease that just affects the person living with it. It affects everybody, right? It affects your family. It affects your relationships, your interactions with others. If you have children, it affects your relationship with your kids, your ability to take care of them at times. So it is a disease that affects everybody. So it's important to be connected, to not be isolated, and to know that you're not alone. I had the opportunity to connect a couple of my patients in a support community of young women who are very like-minded, and they had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I was fortunate they asked me to attend that meeting, and it was just so amazing to see people who connected with each other, who understood each other. And one young lady actually walked in and really just started crying because she was like, I've never been in a community of people who are like me, who are also dealing with this disease, and I really needed this. So being connected is important. Not only being connected to a community in terms of your family or friends or whoever you look to for support, whether it's a church family, whether it's your natural family, it's important to be connected in those ways, but particularly with MS, I believe that it's important to be connected to people who also are living with the disease. I'll probably do a later episode where I talk a little bit more about some of the silent symptoms of MS, but one of the difficulties with MS is that For people who do not have a lot of physical disability, sometimes they still can have a lot of disability and suffer with silent symptoms of MS, which can be cognitive problems, which can be fatigue. And the honest thing is that other people just don't understand if they haven't dealt with it. So many times I have folks who come in to see me and they say, Dr. Williams, everybody keeps telling me I don't look sick. Everybody keeps telling me that I look fine, that it looks like there's nothing wrong with me. And so my family tries to understand, but they don't really understand. So it is important to be connected to communities. And I see a couple of you asking questions about how you can get connected. So a good resource is the National MS Society. Okay, they have a list of support groups in different cities. The Georgia chapter is very active. Also, the MS Foundation has a list, and the MS Association, of running support groups that are in different areas. I know that there are some support groups that are affiliated with certain centers, especially if there is an MS specialty center. Many of those places will have support groups. And I tell people, if you see a need in your community, guess what? Start your own group. Sometimes you are the change that people need to see. And so it's important to find that community. Some people have connected on Facebook, on social media. Some people will find people in their area, but there are resources available, you know. And so if you see the need and the need is not there, you know what? You can be the person that solves that deficit or solves that need, because it's important to know that other people are going through the same thing you're going through. And I think that, you know, as I said, when I went to this meeting not too long ago, the young lady cried because I've been telling people I have 50 people that look like you who are in the same boat, and nobody believed me until they saw the people all sitting there in the room. And so it's just so powerful to know that you're not by yourself, that you are not alone in this disease, and that there are other people who are going through the same thing. But I think it's also important to know that there are other people at different stages of the disease, right, who have gone through things you have gone through and come out on the other side, right? So, you know, I kind of look at it in terms of when we talk about having different kinds of friends. You want somebody that's ahead of you, you want somebody that's kind of in the same boat with you, and then you want somebody that's a little bit behind you that you can help along. And so, you know, that support piece is huge, because I have a lot of patients who really feel isolated and who feel like their family doesn't understand, and it kind of puts them in a place of isolation and puts them in a place of depression. So that is hugely important. And so, you know, it's important, as I said. So, you know, so if you are going to resources online, it might, and those are not giving you what you need, then sometimes it's good to call, right? And I see somebody posted a link to a group of people living with MS, and there are lots of resources in the area. So it is certainly important to get connected. And again, if there's a need that you see, you could be the person that fits that need. So, you know, so that was one group that I helped facilitate start. I have a lot of other ideas about other people that need to be connected. But Dr. Mitzi is one person, and Dr. Mitzi doesn't have MS, you know, so I have to try to find people who are connected. But certainly there are needs that you can meet, and you can be the person that someone else needs to connect with. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will quickly go over my points again. The first point that we talked about living well, the first tip was diet and exercise, right? 9 times out of 10, when you put it in your mouth, you know if you should be eating it or not, right? Okay. And making sure that you're eating fresh, healthy foods and less processed foods. If there's a specific diet that works for you, great. If you can eyeball it and just kind of eat better, then do that. All right. Exercise is hugely important. Check out my last video where I talked a lot about exercise. I spent a lot of time talking about yoga, which is one of my favorite exercises, because it has so many benefits for the body and for the mind, especially for folks with MS. Number 2 tip, stop smoking. All right, put the cigarettes down, okay? Because the cigarettes, the nicotine, right? So if you're vaping and you got nicotine, the nicotine is the problem. The nicotine can help speed up your transformation or speed up the change from relapsing MS to progressive MS. So you can have progressive MS faster if you're smoking, and it also can possibly increase relapses. So smoking is bad for many, many reasons, but particularly for MS, it can make your disease worse. Number 3 tip, stress management, okay? Finding things that you enjoy, whether it is a hobby or activity, journaling, writing your feelings. If the stress is very overwhelming, counseling can always be a great way to kind of get connected with someone and learn good stress management tips, ways to deal with stress in a positive way, because if we don't deal with stress, stress deals with us. And it begins to manifest in physical ways in our bodies, right? So we got to deal with it. We have to deal with it effectively. And as long as we're awake, we're going to have stress. So you're never really going to be stress-free, okay? And sometimes when you sleep, you might not be stress-free, okay? All right, stress management was tip number 3. And number 4, getting connected to a community of people who are a support to you in general, but also a community of people with MS who understand what you're going through and who you can identify with. And a community does not have to be 20 people. Sometimes it can just be one good friend that you can talk to, that you can lean on. But it's helpful sometimes to have multiple people, because sometimes there are people who are further along in their MS journey than you are, and who've been through the things that you've been through, and who are on the other side and can offer you positive feedback and offer you hope that things will turn out okay. All right, so very good. Let me see if anybody has any questions. I have a few extra minutes, so I can answer some questions if you guys have any questions you want to type in. I see somebody was saying that their cousin was diagnosed the same year and their grandmother has MS. Being a mom is stressful, absolutely. So you should have seen me 10 minutes ago. I just got the kids out the tub, washed everybody's hair, got everybody greased up and in pajamas, and then I ran in here to do this podcast. So being a mom is stressful. I definitely understand that. In terms of family members, I do have some families where multiple people have MS, and I have some where that person is the only person. So there is some genetic component to MS, but it's not directly inherited. For instance, like sickle cell, right? So we know with sickle cell, mom has a gene, dad has a gene. We can predict 1 in 4 of the kids will have the disease. But with MS, it's a bunch of different genes and different combinations, okay? Someone asked for Botox to help with walking. So Botox does not help specifically with walking. If people have spasticity or tightness of the muscles, sometimes Botox can help loosen up the muscles to improve walking. So spasticity is tightness or cramping of the muscles, or sometimes if it's really severe, the muscles will actually kind of get, like a leg will get stuck. Like I have some patients with severe spasticity where if they try to stretch out their leg, it'll just get stuck like that. So, so Botox doesn't help with walking specifically, but can help if the muscles are tight and need to be loosened. Somebody said they overdid it at the gym and had a flare. Okay. So balance is important with exercise, right? You know, so again, unfortunately, there's not a scientific way to say if you do 20 leg lifts, that's too many, or you need to do 17 leg lifts and that won't cause you problems. It really is a trial and error. So you do a little bit, and if that knocks you out or makes you feel crummy, for lack of a better, my scientific term, crummy, then you dial back the next time and you do a little bit less. But it's not really a specific way to say you can only do this much exercise. So you just kind of have to find that line. If in doubt, do a little bit and then work your way up. I'll take one more question. Is it normal or unusual to feel better after a relapse than you did before? After the high dose of steroids, you feel better, walking is better. So many people do feel better after steroids because there's a little bit of a high with steroids. They do usually give folks a lot of energy. Certainly, it is very common that people will feel really well after they have a dose of steroids for a relapse, and then when those effects wear off, sometimes they don't feel quite as well. So it is common. We just have to be careful that we don't just keep giving steroids because they do have side effects. So very good. All right. But yeah, people usually do feel good. They clean the house and they're like, Dr. Williams, give me some more of that. And I'm like, well, you know, we don't want to give you diabetes or osteoporosis, so we can't just keep giving the steroids. Anyway. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, I am Dr. Mitzi Joy. I am a board certified neurologist and MS specialist. I am an educator. I am a speaker. I am a researcher. I love working with all people living with MS, and I do research specifically looking at MS in ethnic minority populations, as well as MS in women's issues. And I also am very involved in initiatives to help improve diversity and inclusion in clinical research. So I hope that you all have an amazing night. Please share my video and tune in next week. I will post when I'm going live, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about MS and talk about some other things that you can do to live well, as well as possible with this condition. So you all have a great night. I am going to my exercise class. I'm a bounce fitness fanatic, so I've got to get to the gym and strap on my boots and go do some bouncing. So I'll post a picture if I'm not too worn out after class. So all right, you guys have an amazing night. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. All right, have a great one.